Hello everyone, we hope you're all doing well. Welcome to this video where we will be taking up questions from your step up mains ethics test, and we will be discussing what are the things that you need to remember while writing answers for certain topics. Let me start out with the first question. Discuss the role of virtues and ethics in the fight for sustainability. The fight for sustainability. So how are you going to start your introduction for this answer? You can define what virtues, what ethics means. You can also bring in Aristotle, all right, and talk about what he feels virtues are. Virtues are something which help you to achieve eudaimonia. All right, this is a Greek term which means leading a happy, content life. Okay, so remember these things. In the introduction, you can define what virtues are. You can also define ethics. You can bring in Aristotle's theory on virtue, and you can just give a very brief introduction, which is not more than 50 words. In the body of the answer, you have to give examples as to how virtue and ethics will help us to attain sustainability. One more alternative introduction that you can give over here is sustainability. You all know what it means. Having enough amount of resources for the present generation and using them in such a manner that it is not depleted or reduced to a very drastic amount for the upcoming generations as well. There is one way that you can define sustainability from an ethics angle as well. What is that ethics angle? It is sustainability implies leading our life in such a way that there is less amount of greed and there is just distribution of resources amongst the population which are existing in the present times and also for the upcoming generations. This is giving an ethics angle to the question. Coming to the body of the answer, sustainability, you need to generate points, right? I will give you 3 examples and I'm remembering the sustainable development goals when I'm talking about this. How can virtue ethics help us to tackle poverty in the present times? That is one of the sustainable development goals. How can virtue and ethics help us to increase the women empowerment in our country? All right. The other thing is, how can virtue and also ethics help us to deal with corruption, rising dishonesty, rising intolerance in the country? Right here, I will talk about quality of life. The reason why I'm giving this subheadings is when you're writing the body of the answer, give a subheading like this. Write 1 statement or 2 statements, not more than that regarding that particular subheading, and give an example. Now, when we are talking about poverty in our country, nearly 300 million population are suffering from poverty. The numbers have gone up ever since the pandemic. All right. Now, how can we tackle poverty? There are so many government rules and regulations, programs and proposals that all of you have read about. But all these programs and proposals cumulatively together have not been able to completely remove poverty. But if each and every Indian develops in themselves generosity, and generosity is one of those virtues which was identified by Aristotle as well. So if each and every Indians develop in themselves the generosity to see the others as their own brothers and sisters, even though they might not be related through blood, this generosity will help at a later point in time to tackle poverty. How will it help? When you're generous, you will be involving yourself in charitable activities. That will help to tackle poverty more than anything else, right? So virtue helping to achieve sustainable development goals, to achieve that sustainability, right? Now, ethics talks about using resources or leading a life which is selfless in nature. Right? Now, if you adopt this ethical approach in your life, you will be using more of public transportation facilities. Okay, you will not be involving yourself in corruption activities, and all these at the end of the day will improve the quality of life in our country, is it not? Right? That's one more thing. Ethics also deals with looking at all the moral stakeholders or agents in an equal manner. It builds in you that attitude. And that is something that we need in the present scheme of things, particularly in India, where the participation rate of women in the economy is around 26.5%. If India has any dreams of achieving $5 trillion, becoming inclusive and sustainable, it needs the 50% of its population to participate in the activities that we are carrying out. Sorry. If you're not doing that, then that becomes a problem. So virtue as well as ethics will build in us the generosity, will build in us the courage, right? Will build in us the tolerance which is required to achieve this sustainable life in the society. I've given 3 examples for it. I've told you how to generate points. If you remember that sustainable development goals, over there they've spoken about poverty, they've spoken about climate change, they've spoken about women, hunger, and quite many things. Link all these goals with virtue and ethics. Link some of the things happening in our country. For example, rising fundamentalism which is happening in our country, corruption which is so persistent in our country. Link all these things and generate points by applying how virtue and ethics will help us to overcome that. And wherever possible, you give an example, right? When you talk about the Tata conglomerate, the consortium of Tata companies, they have adopted this generosity to a very large degree, and you see that in the kind of corporate social responsibility related activities they do. All right. So this is what is required for the first question. In the conclusion part, you talk about how we need to emphasize on building this virtue and ethics. We need to be socialized at a very young level. We need moral exemplars or leaders who showcase such virtue and ethics in the society, right? Some sort of way forward or solutions could be given in your conclusion, right? It has to be very brief since this is just a 10-marker question. The next question that we will discuss is related to national freedom struggle and how we fought our national freedom struggle on the basis of ethics. Let me just read out the question. What is the importance of rights and freedom in inculcating moral values in a person? Moral values in a person. The next part is highlight the major instances from our freedom struggle where we fought ethically in spite of being suppressed. Now, when I talk about certain values which are enshrined in our constitution, such as equality, liberty, fraternity, these are 3 values that we borrowed from French Revolution. And why did French Revolution happen at that point in time? The people who were paying taxes, predominantly, they were the ones who were denied the rights and the freedom. Right? When they carried out French Revolution and at a later point in time established a republic, equality, liberty and fraternity became the standard values which guided the behavior of people. And when people accept equality, liberty and fraternity, there is all the more reason to realize unity in our country, to realize tolerance in the country. You're understanding my point? Rights and freedoms. If a person feels that their rights and freedoms are being violated, then that person might take up arms and act in a violent way. And are we seeing that in any way? Yes, we are seeing that in the J&K region, northeastern region, right? Naxalism in other parts of the country and quite many. Okay? Here you should not write that they don't have rights and freedom, but you can say that the perception of lack of rights and freedoms might push certain people towards violent ways of dealing with things. And when I talk about justice, all right, this is something that we borrowed from the Russian Revolution. When we are reading about all these values, equality, liberty, fraternity, and justice, these are certain things that we will adopt in ourselves. Is it not? And when you adopt these values in your own individual behaviors, at the end of the day, you can make your country developed to a very large degree. Okay? That is where you can realize sustainable growth and also inclusive growth. So in terms of importance for an individual, what is the importance? For society, what is the importance? For national, what is the importance? Talk about certain values that we have adopted, all right, from French Revolution, from Russian Revolution, and its importance for our individual life, for our society and national growth. We have one more value, that is liberty. Let me talk about it. Okay. What is the importance of this liberty? If we don't have liberty, right, people will start to act in such a way that they will try to provide a proper framework to their ideas in whatever way possible. When you're shackling the liberty of a person, their morality will also reflect that. They will try to shackle the liberty of the people that they might be living with. But when a country as such provides liberty to its citizens to lead lives in such a way that it does not harm anyone else, the same thing might be reflected in the life of the common people as well. When you look at some of the countries which witnessed Arab Spring, one of the reasons why they witnessed Arab Spring was there was no liberty. People felt that they had less and less amount of opportunities to realize growth, right? And all these things resulted in those countries witnessing Arab Spring as well. When you have rights and freedoms, power in a country is distributed in an equitable manner. When rights and freedoms are not equally distributed, if they are biased towards certain sections in the communities, social frustration, anger might be quite high. And this was also one of the other reasons why some of the countries in the world witnessed Arab Spring. And when you look at our constitution, it tries to divide power in such a way that there is no probability or there is less probability of absolute power appearing in the society. Rights and freedom. And when we talk about rights and freedom, where is it reflected in our constitution? It is reflected in your fundamental rights, right? Having rights and freedom is very important to lead a dignified life as well. And where do you find this dignified life? You find it in Article 21. If rights and freedoms are not given for you, the state can enforce its own views, which might be violating your personal freedom. So fundamental rights, they act as a safeguard for you to ensure that your rights and freedoms do not get arbitrarily violated by the state as well. Importance of rights and freedoms in inculcating moral values. When you yourself enjoy the dignified life, okay, that will shape your moral thinking as well. If you don't enjoy that, you tend to grow up in a situation where you feel that too much of liberty, too much of freedom is wrong. That is something that you are witnessing in communist China, right? So bring out the importance of rights and freedoms in inculcating moral values in a person. We can talk about this from the perspective of common people as well. For example, when you provide freedom for your children, all right, they will be opened up to various ideologies that are prevalent in the world. Yes, some of these ideologies are quite bad, but when you give them the freedom to explore all these ideologies, they might develop their own morality, which will generate the maximum amount of goodness for themselves and also the society. What is the example that I can give for this? When I talk about Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, when I talk about Mahatma Gandhi ji, All of them were provided freedom by their parents to explore the education, right? And this freedom gave them the necessary flexibility to shape their own morality, which generated goodness not just for them, but for the country as a whole. Right? Bring out the importance of rights and freedom in inculcating moral values in a person here have come from a constitutional angle and have also come from a family angle. Okay? Now, if you provide freedom of choice for your kids when they get married or to pursue their employment opportunities as they want, they will reflect this freedom in their own behavior as well. Right? They might be more accepting of LGBTQ lifestyle. More freedom and rights will make our society inclusive by bringing those people who have been marginalized in our society since a very long time. Okay? From a constitutional angle and family angle, I've tried to justify it. What is the next part of the question? Here they've asked, highlight major instances from our freedom struggle where we have fought ethically in spite of being suppressed. I will give you one example for this and I want you to add more examples from your side. When I talk about the non-cooperation movement in 1922, right? This was a movement that many people believed that will give us success in our fight against the Britishers. Unfortunately, this movement was withdrawn by Gandhiji because of one incident called as Chauri Chaura incident. Why did Gandhiji do that at that particular point in time? In Chauri Chaura incident, some Indians who were peacefully protesting, right? Some of them were arrested and they were beaten. And to take vengeance, right? These protesters, they burnt a police station with officers inside them. They showed violence. Many people at this point in time wanted the non-cooperation movement to continue despite the Chauri Chaura incident. But Mahatma Gandhiji said no. Winning independence is important. Yes, that is something which will bring goodness for us. But winning independence through violent ways is never the required means. Even though the Britishers tried to suppress the non-cooperation movement through violence, Indians should never hit back with violence. Rather, they should win the independence through non-violent and satyagraha means. Right? This is just one instance where we showcased, all right, being ethical despite of being suppressed. One more instance that I can talk about is both during the times of World War I and World War II, we supported Britishers because we believed justice was on their side, even though the same justice was denied to us. The leaders at that particular point in time, including leaders such as Nehru, Gandhiji, did not want to take, right, or misuse the weakness or the vulnerability of the Great Britain at that particular point in time during the World War II situation, standing for ethics, despite those ethics being denied to us by the British. Just two instances. Please add few more instances from your side. The next question that we will discuss is based on this absolutism and relativism concept. What is this question? The question is, what is moral absolutism? All right, and explained with examples. Now, what is this morality? Morality is a set of values that we hold quite dear to us at an individual level. Ethics, remember, is at a societal level. Morality is something at an individual level. Now, what is this absolutism concept? Many people believe that there are certain morals or morality which are true across time and space. All right? There are no doubts about it. For example, do not murder. Now, this is a morality which is something that is applicable, that is true across time and space. There is no counter argument to this. being honest, all right, is also one more morality that is true. There is no counter argument or different flavors to this. Being honest is something that is accepted universally across time and across space, right? Apart from that, I can talk about some of your religious morality that people hold very dear to themselves. If you're part of a religion such as, say, Hinduism, all right, or let us talk about other religions as well. There are certain moralities, right, which are universally applicable to those people who belong to it. For example, tolerance, care, compassion, all right. These are not just religious morality which are true for only those religious people. These are something which are true across cultures, across time, not just in the historical times, but also in the present times. That is what moral absolutism means, right? And I've given you some examples of it. When you take up Mahatma Gandhiji, what were some of the morality that he held very true to himself? It was non-violence and satyagraha. There was no instance where this non-violence could be compromised, right? This was something that you have to hold true to yourself, no matter what, even if harm comes your way. When I talk about tolerance, this was one of the values, morality, that Ashoka tried to imbibe through his Dhamma principles. When I talk about tolerance, again, here you can talk about Akbar. What did Akbar do in his Din-e-Ilahi? He also spoke about tolerance, right? Compassion, Ashoka spoke about it in his Dhamma principles. So all these things are there, right? This is what you call as moral absolutism. Certain morals which are true across time and space. Coming back, okay, I've given you some examples as well. Here you can also talk about Immanuel Kant, right? He gave certain things. He termed it as categorical imperatives. These are set of rules, right, which we are supposed or obligated to follow at all points in time. Categorical imperatives. It doesn't matter whether you're a king or a servant or a civil servant. It doesn't matter from which culture you are. You have to follow these set of morals. Absolutism. On the contrary to moral absolutism, you have something called as moral subjectivism. Okay, absolutism can also be replaced by objectivism. Sorry, this is, both are the same things. Then you have moral relativism, right, and subjectivism. It can also be called as subjectivism. This morality can be replaced by ethical absolutism or ethical relativism. What does this relativism mean? It basically means that you cannot apply a set of ethics or morality across time and space. There are no universal morality or universal ethics. That is what relativism or subjectivism talks about. If there are certain set of morals which are there in one culture, which are not there in another culture, the culture might explain that. For example, when you take up American society, over there the accepted behavior is that after you attain a certain age, you have to move out of your home and find a proper framework or direction for your life. When we talk about our culture, it is not like that. Here, we still emphasize on taking care of our parents even after we attain a certain age, right? What is that acceptable morality or ethics? It differs from culture to culture. It differs from society to society, from different historical time periods as well. At one particular point in time, being or following caste was considered as a moral behavior. But when we talk about now, right, we all know that caste, even if you're following the regressive systems or traditions associated with caste, such as untouchability, all those things are immoral now. So this is what moral relativism or subjectivism talks about. There is no universal morality that you can apply across different cultures, across different historical time periods, right? So since this question is done, let us now move on and discuss the next question. Before I move on, here you can also talk about the way our foreign policy has moved about, right? at our independence time, we were following something called as non-aligned movement. It was idealistic in nature, right? But now we are following a pragmatic approach. So all these things you can talk about it, right? Moving on, let us talk about the next question. What are the main ethical issues? What are the main ethical issues involved in the rising inequality in India? Rising inequality in India. Evaluate the effectiveness of Gandhi's trusteeship doctrine. So what are the main ethical issues when we talk about inequality? As long as we have a scenario where 70% of nation's wealth rests among the 1% of the population, there is violation of the principle of justice. You guys agree with me, right? As long as we have such high levels of inequality, realizing fraternity will be very difficult, right? There will also be negative emotions in the society such as anger, frustration over the persisting state of life. You will also have, right, power which might be distributed in a rather unjust manner. People who have more money might have a greater say in how things are done. Okay, crony capitalism, you all have heard about it, right? So you have to give examples of some ethical issues which might arise when you have inequality in the society. Right? Now here in justice, you can talk about economic justice, social justice. Here you can talk about gender justice as well. But since this is a 10-marker question, just mention the subheading, give one statement how it might be violated when you have inequality and an example. That's about it. Moving on, what have they asked next? How will the doctrine of trusteeship, to what extent the doctrine of trusteeship will be effective when we apply this in today's corporate world? Now, what is this doctrine of trusteeship? What Gandhiji said was, whomsoever has wealth over and above their needs in life, the extra wealth that they have accumulated for themselves, it does not actually belong to them, but rather they are trustees of that particular wealth. And they have to utilize this extra accumulated wealth for the welfare of everyone. Right? That is what Mahatma Gandhiji said. Now, when we talk about the corporate world or the present time, it is motivated by profit. When you look at the pharmaceutical companies, they want as strict regulations as possible for IPR, intellectual property rights. Right? They don't want to waive off these rights for the benefits of others. Where did we witness this? We witnessed this when we spoke about COVID-19 or when we saw COVID-19 vaccine issues. The moment the corporate world thinks of themselves as enterprises which don't just have an individual identity but rather have a larger identity in ensuring that they bring welfare to everyone or to the world, most of the problems that we are facing today, right, will automatically reduce. When you take up the works taken by Tata, Wipro, they conduct so many CSR activities over and above what their natural business is, right? And these businesses, these CSR activities that they carry out, it might be in the domain of gender justice, providing education to women, constructing schools. The overall quality, the overall welfare of the world, it increases, is it not? That is something that you can talk about. And it's not just in terms of CSR activities. When you involve all the people, not just those customers who can afford your products, but involve all your customers, there will be near realization of equity in the society, in the world. Right? Problems such as poverty, inequality, it might reduce as much as possible. So many of the sustainable development goals that we have can be realized. Some of the times what these corporates do, they tend to use environment, they tend to deteriorate the environment for their own selfish needs. But once you apply the doctrine of trusteeship, once they accept this as their standard mode of thinking, and showcase this in their behavior as well. They will try to make themselves as least responsible for the climate change as possible. They might be tempted to go for more green and renewable way of generating energy, right? So all these things are there which you can include in your answer, right? What are the main ethical issues involved? I've spoken to you, I've given you subheadings. Just give one statement and an example for this, right? Here I just want to talk about one of the recent, not so immediately recent, but nevertheless, it happened in the last 2-3 years. It is yellow protest. This yellow protest, where did it happen? It happened in the country of France. Over there, the government in France, it increased the taxes. The overall burden of the taxes would have been more on the common people. And France is one of those developed countries where inequality is increasing, right? So the people on whom the tax burden increased, they came out to the streets and protested against their government, right? Rising inequality is showcasing itself in certain movements, not just in the developing country, but developed country as well. Just make America great again and everything. It's nothing but at the core of it, it is inequality. The people who have migrated there, initially they were doing blue collar jobs. When I say blue collar job, it is the physical work, being a driver, right? Having a provision store, something like that. But in the last few decades, what has happened, Indians and other migrants have accumulated knowledge and they are becoming more and more prominent in this management positions, and they are slowly taking away jobs from those people who are staying there. Inequality between the Americans who have been staying there and also the migrants who have come from different parts of the world is increasing. This inequality is showcasing itself in terms of Make America Great Again, Brexit, and all these things. My friend, in ethics, it doesn't matter which book you have read. What matters is, from the book that you have read, how much of basics you have understood and how well you can apply those basics to what you have studied as part of your GS-1, 2, 3 syllabus. And more importantly, how you can apply this and see what is happening in the society, in the world, to be more precise. When we talk about Agnipath scheme, whether that scheme is right or wrong, that's not something that we will dwell into now. But the anger that we saw on the streets is a manifestation of the inequality that is building up in the society, right? How is this related to inequality? One of the ways of fighting inequality is through employment opportunities, and those employment opportunities we have not been able to create in a qualitatively good manner in numbers as much as we require. Is it not? That's something that you can use in your answers. But don't say that Agnipath is bad or anything like that. The anger that we saw on the streets, that would be useful. How to overcome this inequality, they have not asked you. But in general, in the conclusion, you can talk about inequality as such can be tackled when we become more compassionate, right? Generous, sympathy, empathy for everyone in the society. Once we start, we all know that all Indians are our brothers and sisters. We have practiced this line, but we rarely, all right, follow this in our lives. Preaching is different thing. Practicing is a whole different question altogether. All these things should come into the picture, and only then we will be able to tackle inequality that is happening in our country and also the world. The next question which we will discuss is based on quotations. Here they've asked, what do each of the following quotations mean to you? Now we will start our discussion by talking about a general framework that you can follow while attempting questions based on quotations. In the initial part, okay, in the introduction to a quote, try to identify what the author is trying to tell you, convey to you in a brief manner. The core message of the author in a brief manner, you should be able to apply in your introduction. Another way of introducing that quote is, try to talk about the relevance of that quote in the present times, because when they're giving you the quote, the person who has set the question paper, he or she might have chosen that quote because it has some relevance to the present times. Is it not? So you can briefly mention about either the core message that the person is trying to tell you, or you can talk about the relevance. Sorry. Okay, this is important. Moving on, right? In the body of the answer, how will you generate points? Here you can generate points by applying the code to what you have studied in your UPSC syllabus. It could be from GS-1, 2 and 3. You can apply, next you have to apply this to your current affairs as well. What is happening in the society? It might be Russia-Ukraine war, it might be something related to pandemic, right? So on and so forth. If you are able to do this, you will be generating major chunk of the content which is required for answering quotation-based questions. Sometimes you can also take a contrary stand to the quotations in the body of the answer itself, but be brief. Okay, and even when you are taking contrary stand, here you have to give examples. Examples are something that needs to be there everywhere, right? Moving on, how will you conclude this? To implement any code, there needs to be a change that you need to bring at an individual level, at a society level and at a national level. How do you bring about this change? The change might be required, right? When we incorporate courage in us, it might be, the change might come about much more easily if we develop compassion, right? So from the first part till the last part, the answers that you're writing should have that ethical terms. Each and every line should have that ethics terms and terminologies. If not, it becomes like a GS-1, 2, 3 answer. In the conclusion, what is the value that is required to bring about that change that quotation is talking about? If we can highlight this value, that is very much appreciated. The first quotation that they've given you is, no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself, This is by Friedrich Nietzsche. Now let us try to apply the framework. So how am I going to start the intro for this? I'll first try to understand what is the core message that the person is trying to say. The core message that he is trying to say is, at any given point in time, you should not let others own you. You should have a free will of your own. When you lose this free will, when you lose this privilege, people will own you in one way or the other. They will manipulate you. And this is not something that is good for either you or for the society. When I talk about Germany, that too during the times of Hitler, there was no free will. People who were living in Germany, they belonged to that extremist ideology. Not all of them, but most of them. When we talk about the present times, the relevance, the privacy of the individual is being violated. Alright? At multiple levels. The government is violating it. When I say government, please don't use our government example. You can talk about USA, where it has used, right, softwares to spy on their own citizens. Julian Assange spoke about it. Edward Snowden spoke about it. You can highlight the Pegasus issue and the fear associated with it. You can talk about how multinational corporations use all these sophisticated algorithms, artificial intelligence to own you. This is what is happening, right? They're owning the way you think. They can manipulate you because they have so much of data at their disposal. Relevance, privacy, and self-discovery is something which is going to be very difficult in the digital age. Something like that. Here I have applied the core message paradigm and I have applied the relevance paradigm as well. And I want you to do this as much as possible for all the codes. Coming back. What did I tell you the next time around in the body of the answer? Apply this to UPSC syllabus. My friends, because of the want of time, I will be discussing just one or two examples. There are multiple examples that you can talk about. Okay, let me talk about this from a UPSC GS-1 perspective. Right, here I can talk about world history. When you take up French Revolution, when you take up American Revolution and whatnot, all of this revolution were nothing but a manifestation of people, that too people in the lower sections of the society trying to take control of themselves, trying to break free from feudalism. Is it not? When I talk about our country itself, our national freedom struggle was also a part that signifies this, right? So these are two examples just from the perspective of GS1. When I talk about GS2, in your constitution, you have so many fundamental rights. In Article 21, you also have right to privacy. And this was something that the court explicitly recognized in Justice K. Puttaswamy judgment as well. Why did they do that? They did that to ensure that neither the state nor any other company utilizes the resources at their disposal to own you, to own your thinking process, to violate your free will, right? So from GS1, GS2 have applied this. You can apply it from your GS3 perspective as well. Next, what did I tell you? You have to apply it from a current affairs perspective. In the name of advertisement, the moment you Google something, in the next few Google searches that you do, you will get so many advertisements about the same product, right? You all remember about Cambridge Analytica, where Facebook, where this firm used the data of the Facebook users to manipulate the US presidential elections, right? Here you can also talk about the crony capitalism that we are seeing, where big multinational companies are having a lot more say in government affairs, where you can talk about institutions such as WTO, all right, a global institution where developed countries are trying to own the process of global trade, right? This is what is happening in climate change negotiations as well, right? To own ourselves, in the conclusion part, to own ourselves, what is it that we need to do? We need to have that free will. So how can we retain this free will? We need to be objective. All right. First and foremost thing, we need to have clarity in our life. And more importantly than that, we need to have the courage to question. We need to have the courage to follow our conviction, if our conviction is in the right direction. Until and unless we have that, okay, maintaining of free will becomes that much more difficult, right? The same framework you have to apply to the other two quotations as well, right? I'll just explain the core message behind those two quotations. From your side, I want you to apply the other parts of the framework that we discussed. And one more thing before I move on, see, whatever framework that we have given, it's not something that you have to follow to the letter and spirit in every question. In some of the questions, yes, it might be possible to apply it. The framework is something that we have designed so that you can apply it in as many quotations, in as many questions as possible. But there might be questions where it might not be able, we will not be able to apply. In those kind of questions, bring your originality. And you don't have to stick to this framework in perpetuity. If you believe that there are certain counter arguments that can be made, you can make it. Okay, if you believe that there might be another dimension which might be included, do it. You have that freedom to do it. Okay, do not blindly follow something. When you blindly follow something in perpetuity, that is when a saturation will be reached. In the last few years, what is happening is, in ethics, the marks that they're scoring is coming down. The reason being, they're all following what has already been available in the videos in the market, and they're not bringing out their originality that much more. Bring your originality, include, if you're writing 10 points, I'm not saying that all 10 points have to be original, but 2 or 3 points which, if you can present it from your life and experience, that is very much appreciated, right? Moving on, let me just talk about the next two quotations. The price of peace. The price of peace is righteousness. Is righteousness. Now, what did I tell you? In the introduction part, you have to talk about the core message, right, of the code. If you believe that you need to realize peace, then you cannot compromise on the righteous approach. This is very important. All right, always remember that. You can frame an introduction in those regards, right? When we talk about our freedom struggle, we wanted to win our freedom struggle, but we wanted to win it in peaceful ways from the times of the moderates, right? And even when we talk about revolutionaries such as Bhagat Singh, when they exploded the bomb, they could have killed quite many people, but they did not design the bomb in such a way because they realized that that's not a righteous approach, right? The price of peace is righteousness, and there is no compromise on this. This code is like Kantian categorical imperative, which is applicable universally across time and place, right? What is the relevance of this in the present times? You're seeing multiple areas in the world which is suffering from civil conflicts, be it in Syria, be it in Myanmar, right? And peace is not something which is manifesting itself at a very large level. Peace is something which is also not there at an individual level. Mental peace, we talk about it. Huh? Why do we violate peace in the present times? It might be because of rise of selfishness. This is what is happening here. It might be because of power greed. This is what is happening here. It might be in India, though you don't have to talk about India, but nevertheless, you can say that there are countries who are not taking stands on Myanmar issues over Rohingya because they are fearful that their national interest might be thwarted or reduced because of explicit, all right, condemning of Myanmar's action, right? The price of peace is righteousness. There is no counter argument to this. Applied from a UPSC GS-1 perspective, here you can talk about Akbar. Before going to Akbar, you can talk about, let's not go with Akbar for this, let's go with Ashoka. He is much more suitable for this. He followed Kalinga War. He participated in it. There's so much of violence that he saw, he was not able to reconcile with the losses. He wanted to establish peace, right? And he tried to establish it through bringing about a change in his morality, not just in him, but in the society as well. And what was the righteous approach that he chose for himself? The Dhamma principles. And during his rule, after he did take up Dhamma, after he went on this righteous approach, he was able to ensure a peaceful rule. Another example that you can talk about is Abraham Lincoln. The price of peace is righteousness. When President Abraham Lincoln came to power, slavery was an accepted practice, but that was something which was against all human values, right? And there was also intermittent fight which used to happen between the the Americans who used to stay there and African Americans. There was always that resentment and anger. There was no peace in the society. To establish peace in the society for the longer term, they went into a civil war, right? And Abraham Lincoln abolished slavery. He wanted to achieve peace in a righteous manner, right? The price of peace is righteousness. And when I talk about our country, once we got independence, at various points in time, we have we have taken contrary stance against USSR, against America, on the issues of Korean War, on the issues of Vietnam War, because we believe that if you want to realize peace at an international level, you need to follow that righteous approach. You should not accept certain things, even if they are in your interest, if that peace is being violated, right? The price of peace is righteousness. You can apply this for the growing amount of nuclear weapons in the society, right? The nuclear arms, other conventional arms, all of them are increasing. at the end of the day, there are all the chances that it might hamper the peace in the longer term, right? So if we have to bring about peace, we need to have a righteous approach in terms of reducing these nuclear weapons at a global level, right? You have certain countries who use, right, the instrument of terror as the state policy. Now, this instrument is creating challenges for so many other countries. But to ensure that we fight these challenges, we cannot emphasize on answering terror with terror, right? We need to be peaceful in our ways of approaching it. We need to follow an approach which is based on righteousness, and that is what India is doing, right? You have so many other countries. When we talk about Afghanistan and Pakistan, both of these countries use terror as instruments of state policy. You don't have to write, but I'm just giving you an example. But when you talk about India, that's not the case. We're trying to tackle this terrorism at a military level, but more important than that, we're trying to establish peace by engaging with those people who have that anger and resentment. We're trying to establish peace by bringing in development to the region, by creating employment opportunities in the region. These are righteous approach, is it not? Right? That's how you need to go about and answer this quotation. Moving on, the next one is, by plucking her petals. By plucking her petals, you do not gather the beauty of the flower. This is a quotation which is given by Tagore, right? Sometimes you will come across quotations like this or essay topics like this, which will be quite difficult to comprehend. By plucking her petals, you do not gather the beauty of flower. Now, flower, right, when you look at it, it gives you happiness. So what is it that you feel when the flower is in the ground, it is blooming and everything, it gives you happiness. But at the same time, you feel that flower would be nice if I wear it, if I hold it in my hand and pose for a photo, and you might go for that. So when that happens, right, you're removing that flower from its natural place. And the happiness that you get, will it be short term or long term? It will be just short term. Is it worth plucking the petals? It's not, is it not? If I apply this to the present society, what does it mean? By plucking her petals, you do not gather the beauty of flower. I can apply this to the tribals and the policy that we have made. For example, when we got independence, people in the country, there was a debate how to bring development to the tribals. On one side, people said that we need to completely assimilate tribals to our lifestyle. We should not pay attention to their culture and historical legacy and everything. Another set of people said, no, we should leave them just like that so that their historical culture continues. But the policy that we implemented, the tribal punchal policy, it tried to find a balance, right? Here, we brought development to them at a pace that they wanted to. That is something that you can talk about. We did not want to pluck the tribals away from their historical roots and bring them somewhere else. No. We let them be where they are, and that is where they can bring out the best in themselves. That is just one example. Now, if you're starting an introduction for this, right? Today, we discussed one question which was about rights and freedoms. Rights and freedoms to an individual, right, should not be plucked by state or any other agency, right? When you do that, you're creating challenges in an individual life that will make them unhappy at the end of the day, right? That is one message that they're trying to convey through this quote. By plucking her petals, you do not gather the beauty of the flower. Give people the rights and freedoms that they require. Taking away their rights and freedoms will not make them any better, will not create any goodness or happiness in the society. And try to apply examples such as tribal policy in your body of the answer. Where are we seeing by plucking her petals, you do not gather the beauty of flower in the present scenario? Education. The kind of education that we have, it is structured in such a way that whatever innovation, creativeness that we might have had at one particular point in time, it's plucked away in the name of scoring good marks. And then all this innovativeness, creativeness, you are losing out on. That's not something that you want, right? We have to ensure that we give you the skills without compromising on your core creativity. That is when the whole beauty of your character, your personality comes into the picture. If someone identifies themselves as transgenders, do not push them into hormonal therapy. That is what happens in India, because being a transgender is seen from a very negative perspective, prejudice perspective. Don't do that. Give them the right and freedom to choose their lifestyle, right? And they will be able to contribute in a positive manner to society. They will be happy in their life. So we need examples like this. How to ensure that we don't pluck the petals. You need to have tolerance for other views, other opinions, right? That is one value that I think will help in this regard, right? So this is briefly about the quotations that was part of your ethics test paper. I hope you have been able to get a framework and how you can apply this framework to your quotation-based questions. The next question which we are going to talk about is on the topic of emotional intelligence. Elaborate the role of emotional intelligence in conflict resolution. Discuss with examples various conflict resolution strategies a civil servant can utilize. What is this emotional intelligence? On a daily basis, we are overcome by so many emotions. Some of these emotions might be positive in nature, some of these emotions might be negative in nature. Whenever we act on these emotions in an impulsive manner, more often than not, it creates challenges for us in our life. More often than not, when you act impulsively, it can cause unhappiness as well. A person who is emotionally intelligent, he is able to reason, analyze and objectively act based on these emotions. That is one of the important traits that you need to have in your life, whether you are a civil servant or not. But for a civil servant, this is even more important. Because if you become an IAS officer, you will be dealing with people from various strata of society. Some of them might be in power and they might be pressurizing you to implement certain targets. Your own colleagues might not be working together as a team. You will be meeting people on a daily basis, hundreds of people on a daily basis who have anger and resentment, right? So when you're dealing with all these people, you need to know how to deal with them. If someone is talking in a very high tone, you should not instinctively or impulsively become angry over them. You have come across many videos which went viral where the politicians lost their temper and patience and spoke to them in a very harsh manner. Some of the politicians even hit people who had come to meet them, right? These are certain things that we have to avoid at all costs, is it not? Coming back, elaborate on the role of emotional intelligence in conflict resolution. Emotional intelligence helps us to understand our own self, right? It helps us to, or equips us to understand others. It equips us, all right, to choose a course of action that is as sustainable or as happy and as inclusive as possible, right? Course of action based on objectiveness, you will try to ensure that everyone wins, right? Inclusive and happy. Apart from that, role of emotional intelligence is whatever goals that you have, if you implement it in a proper way, in a way where everyone is motivated towards it, you will be able to achieve it, all right, in a quick and timely manner as well, with minimum conflicts, right? When you're using emotions, you're providing a platform for everyone to participate in it. You make everyone feel respected, right? These emotions you need to understand. when you're working as a civil servant, you need to understand that everyone should feel that they're part and parcel of the bureaucracy. If you have a negative emotion where you put down people based on the opinions that they have, those people at a later point in time, even if they have good amount of thoughts to contribute, they will be silent. They will become more and more demotivated, right? But a person who is emotionally intelligent is able to bring all people together to achieve a goal, right? These are some of the important role emotional intelligence has in terms of conflict resolution. Apart from that, all right, there are a few more things. How does discuss with examples the various conflict resolution strategy a civil servant can utilize? All right, you can talk about regular meetings where we are providing a platform for everyone to talk about. Apart from that, what else can we say? Apart from regular meetings, you can talk about team outings to build a system of camaraderie, okay? A grievance readdressal system, actively listening to the people who have grievances, okay? Judging the people who are working by including both the skills that they are bringing to the table and also their emotional quotient, that is IQ plus EQ, right? You can also use the strategy of a counselor or conduct regular seminars to equip the people who are working, with whom you are working, to deal with any stress or anxiety they might be facing in life. These are some strategies that you can employ, okay, emotional intelligence conflict resolutions that you can employ to ensure that the civil servants meet their constitutionally obligated duties and challenges in a positive manner, right? Let us now move on. And here I have not given any examples as such, right? But you can talk about people such as Homi, Jahangir, Baba, right? Whenever a person who was working under Baba, he was not able to meet any challenge for any circumstances which was not in their control. If someone faced failure, the responsibility of that failure was not put on that individual, but rather Homi, Jahangir, Baba took it upon themselves. Vikram Sarabhai was also one such person, right? This is emotional intelligence. When we are talking about Mahatma Gandhi ji, he was met with anger, frustration by those people who were witnessing partition related wounds. But when Mahatma Gandhi ji went to eastern Pakistan, he sat for a satyagraha, he fasted till the people stopped violence. Conflict resolution, leading by example, is also one such example, right? So this is about the question related to emotional intelligence. Let us now move on and discuss the next question. Discuss the basic measures which you would include if you were asked to evaluate the performance of a civil servant. Performance parameters. Performance parameters. Would you give more importance to code of ethics or citizens' perception of public service equality? Okay. Evaluate the performance of civil servant. Here, whatever UPSC syllabus topics that you have read about, in terms of how, to what extent they are observing integrity, to what extent they are showcasing transparency, to what extent they are showing accountability, right? To what extent they are showcasing rule of law, their emotional quotient. It has to be on a very wide, holistic set of parameters that you need to judge the civil servants, right? That is about the first part. Would you give more importance to the code of ethics or citizens' perception of public service quality? Sometimes what happens when you're following a code of ethics, right? Code of ethics following at every instant of time might not be desirable. For example, what if you're an administrator working in a backward area and the government is having, all right, a program for the welfare of people in that area, but the person does not have the documentation required to avail of that program. So code of ethics, which is like a standard operating procedure, talks about following the rule of law, right? So in such cases, even if that person deserves it, you will not be having that discretionary power to go ahead and give it, right? So the perception of the public on that matter might reduce. But when you have a holistic code of ethics where they're also focusing on showcasing justice, all right, and you uphold it, right, obviously the perception of the public will increase. So when we are talking about which is more important, it is both code of ethics as well as public perception which is important, right? Until and unless the public perceive you in a positive light, right, whatever code of ethics you might be following, they've become meaningless. Showcase that equality, showcase how you're upholding justice, transparency, accountability, integrity, probity. People should perceive you. There are certain administrators who the public respects a lot. For example, Dr. Ashok Khemka, Durga Shakti Nagpal. Why do public have a positive perception, right, on them? Because they have showcased these values. Public doesn't care whether they are following code of ethics in each and every regard. The next question which we will discuss is based on the performance of a civil servant, would you give more importance to code of ethics? Let me read out the whole question. Discuss the basic measures which you would include if you are asked to evaluate the performance of a civil servant, right? Let me first answer this and then I'll come to the second part of the question. Now this is rather a straightforward question. Whatever major UPSC GS-4 syllabus terms that you have read about, include that. For example, to what extent that civil servant is following rule of law, to what extent that person is showing integrity, in the sense no corruption, right? To what extent you have the civil servant is showcasing probity, transparency, right? Accountability, right? Along with that, over here you can also include emotional intelligence. We discussed about this. To what extent the person is able to motivate the people who are working with him. To what extent the civil servant is using his emotions to build trust among the public on the institutions, so on and so forth. You can also talk about to what extent they are following code of conduct or ethics, right? Things like this, right? It is a holistic parameters to judge the performance of a civil servant. Here you can also include values such as people's perception, right? To what extent a civil servant officer is humble. Okay, right. Now let me move on to the second aspect of the question. Would you give more importance to the code of ethics? Should you give more importance to the code of ethics or citizens' perception? Citizens' perception of public service. What is this code of ethics? It is a set of standard ethical practices that a civil servant is expected to showcase at all instances. It might be equality, it might be showcasing justice, okay? To what extent they are showcasing integrity, a set of standard ethical practices, right? A civil servant is expected to showcase this at all points in time when they are doing their duties and even when they are not working, right? The more they follow the code of ethics, the people will develop a positive perception vis-a-vis the bureaucracy, right? They will trust the officers and the policies of the government. If you don't follow the code of ethics, more and more people will have a negative perception, and that is exactly what is happening, is it not? Coming to the citizen perception, there is this one code which says that justice should not only be done, it should be seen to be done. right? Now, citizen perception is quite important. It is to a certain degree dependent on how civil servants work. You have to create awareness amongst this public as to the roles and responsibilities that civil servants have, and how, to what extent they should be even allowed to monitor and regulate the civil servants working. To regulate, we have this social audit, right, and mechanisms like that. They build a positive perception, right? If civil servants are showing egoistic attitude in their working, the public will not have a positive perception. When it comes to a civil servant, following code of ethics in a mechanical, artificial manner, that in itself will not help. Along with following code of ethics, you need to work in such a way that you create positive public perception on how you work. When you look at offices such as Ashok Khemka, Durga Shakti Nagpal, E. Sridharan, these are civil servants who have been able to follow that code of ethics in life, which helped them to build a positive perception on their work, not just when they were working, but even now we think that their style of working is still relevant. They're able to build that positive perception on the institutions for which they were working. You can talk about Homi Jahangir Baba over here, Vikram Sarabhai, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, right? So these are some of the important things that you have to talk about. If you ask me, in a civil servant life, both code of ethics as well as public perception is very important. Justice should not only be done, it should be seen to be done. Whenever public perceives you in a positive manner, whatever work, whatever instructions you give them, they will actively follow it. If you don't create a positive perception, then they might be unwilling to follow what you're trying to say. Right? Let us now move on and discuss the next question. The next question is, discuss the vital role played by Citizens' Charter in public life and governance. If you were a civil servant, discuss the measures you would take to include public opinion, in your governance framework. Discuss the vital role played by Citizens' Charter in public life and governance. For people who are part of the governance, a Citizens' Charter gives them a clarity of goals. What is it that they need to achieve? It also gives them a framework in terms of what acceptable behaviors are. Right? Now, when we talk about public life, it creates a mechanism for the public to judge or hold the civil servants accountable. Apart from that, it creates transparency. Right? So these are some of the things that are created by Citizens' Charter for people in the governance and people in public life. Right? You can add more values to it as in when you move on. Right? It also emphasizes, for governance, it also emphasizes on good governance by encouraging facts such as encouraging behaviors which showcase integrity, right? Honesty. All right. Coming back, right? Over here, when we talk about measures, the second part of the question, due to want of time, we will not be able to discuss all of the aspects or points here. We are just trying to give you a general direction in how you have to think. The second part is, discuss the measures you would take to include public opinion in your governance. You need to ensure that code of conduct is implemented in a proper manner. It is not just a thing that is followed in letter, but also in spirit. You need to create awareness amongst the civil servant to work in a humane manner. Right? You need to create a grievance readdressal system and take up the grievances of the common people at every stage. All right? That is also something that would be important. Now, when you're conducting regular meetings, right, give a platform for the people to participate and showcase their opinions on certain important issues. In developed countries, they have something called as town meetings. Now, these town meetings are usually conducted by the legislators over there. But even a civil servant can conduct a town meeting which is open to all public, where the public will participate and talk about the issues that they're facing and how we can go about solving it. These are some aspects that you can use to build public opinion. You can use social media in a positive manner to highlight the work that you're doing, provide a platform for even the users from that particular area to showcase their opinion, including public opinion in your work. Right? These are some of the important aspects related to this question. The question that we discussed, right? The last two ones were rather straightforward, so that is why I have kind of quickened my pace. All right, let me now move on and discuss the next question. Do you agree that without the right to information, governments cannot be held accountable for their actions? Now, this, the way they have framed it, right, it is very pessimistic in nature, and if you take a stand saying that yes, that is true, that is not something that would be appreciated. Even without right to information, right, you can hold governments accountable for their action. What is the ultimate accountability measure that we have in a democratic country such as ours? We have elections, is it not? So you can talk about this. Apart from that, there are other mechanisms to hold the government officers accountable, right? Government can be held accountable. For example, we have parliament. We have so many standing committees. We have committees such as Public Accounts Committee, which go into the kind of work the government is doing and try to hold the government accountable through debates, speeches, question hour, 0 hour. All of you know about it. We have social audit. Okay, you have media, which acts as the voice of the common people to hold the government accountable. Right to information, it does help. Where does it help? It puts information in the hands of the person who seeks it. The other measures that you have, that does not achieve that in a very easy manner. Right to information, on the other hand, eases the accessibility of information to anyone who desires it. That is where its greater uniqueness lies. But for the question which says this, which talks about, do you agree that without the right to information, governments cannot be held accountable for their actions? No, because we have other mechanisms to hold the government accountable. However, holding government accountable at the level of individual has become easier because of Right to Information Act, because information can now be accessed by any common citizen who wishes or seeks to know to what extent the government resources are being used. Right? So that is something that you can talk about. The other part of the question is, analyze the major hindrance to this right and the reforms needed. What are the hindrances that we face from the aspect of offices? Right? We'll talk about it. Over here, many people might be aware, the officers might be aware of Right to Information Act, but that is not a guarantee that all of them will be aware of how Right to Information Act works, what is the application process, under which time you need to provide information, right? And in which format you have to provide information. It has to be in a format that is easily understandable by the people, right? If they give such tons of information to you, decrypting that information itself takes you a lot of time, right? But here, when we talk about government enterprises, there is lack of motivation in terms of coming out with information. Okay, they fear Right to Information Act. Now, the officers working themselves, right, might create challenges to honor Right to Information. This could be in the form of long delays. In some cases, there have been murders as well, trying to create fear amongst those people who want to blow the whistle on any major scam. Apart from this, from the level of common people, those who want to access, there is a lack of awareness amongst the common people about the Right to Information Act. Now, people believe that it is a laborious process. Even though we have given a 30 days time limit, right, more often than not, this is violated. Yes, we do have information commissions that you can approach, but these information commissions, they work in a way which is silo or non-accessible to common people, right? This is also one more thing that you can talk about. And whenever information is given to the common people, the information might not be easily understandable by the common man. Now, when we talk about from the government side, right, in some of the cases, the information commissions, they have not been the commissioners have not been appointed. We have come out with some whistleblower protection acts, some changes in the whistleblower protection act, where there are certain provisions which are regressive in nature, right? They put the people who apply for RTI acts under threat. Okay, that is one more thing. And the hindrance from the common people, you can add one more point. There has been politicization of RTI as well, using RTI as a tool to score political points. That is one more thing that you can talk about. So from the level of the government enterprises, from the government side and from the common people side, there are quite many hindrances that you can talk about. Specific to all these hindrances, talk about the reforms, how you can use, right, information communication technology in this regard and other such reforms. Fine. So this is about the fifth A part question. Let us now move on. Sorry, fifth B part question. Let us now move on and discuss the sixth question. The sixth question is a quote: if you live on the river, befriend the crocodile. If you live on the river, befriend the crocodile. Discuss the relevance of this Indian proverb in the context of international relations. Here they have not asked you what does this quotation mean to you. Rather, they have asked in terms of specific context of international relations. Now, when we got independence, I told you we were idealistic in our foreign policy goals. We took on USSR, we took on even USA on issues such as Korean, Vietnam. We have already spoken about it. But one thing that we realized is when we were standing up for our ideals, we were facing challenges from US. USA was not willing to help us in terms of food security. USSR also did the same thing in the initial few years. So there was a move from idealism to pragmatism. Right? Now the quote that I've given shows such pragmatism. No matter what kind of regime is there in your neighboring region, if it is a dictatorial regime, if it is a military regime, you still have to be friends with them, or else your national interest will be affected, right? This quote also shows that there is no set of morals that you can apply universally, right? This quote highlights that moral relativism exists in international relations. There are no permanent enemies in politics or international relations, something like this. We can talk about how India, even though it has fundamental disagreement with Taliban, the regime of Taliban, it is still engaging with it because it is in the best interest of India to engage with Taliban, right? The reason why we have not spoken about Myanmar, right, is because we want to ensure that we have a good relationship with the military junta that exists there. And if we don't have that, China will occupy more and more space in Myanmar's sovereign policies, and we can't afford that because Myanmar is a very crucial partner for us when it comes to the development in the northeastern region, right? In international relations, there are no permanent enemies or friends. That is what this question talks about. If you live on the river, no matter the nature of the crocodile, even if it has negative features, negative values, you still have to engage with them. So when I talk about Pakistan, even though terror is emanating from Pakistan, we still are trying to engage with them on multiple issues, trying to improve trade with them, right? As of now, they're all suspended, but nevertheless, India has always wanted to engage, provided this terror is stopped. We cannot in perpetuity avoid dealing with Pakistan because that won't give us any viable solution. Same is the case with China, right? We had Galwan Valley clashes, but we did not suspend any trade ties. We have met them on regular occasions at different platforms. Okay, until and unless we have a pragmatic approach, living in 21st century, or a country's foreign policy in 21st century cannot be practiced in a proper way. That is what this quotation is trying to talk about. So how will you give an introduction for this? Talk about the moral relativism concept which is built into it. Talk about the pragmatism approach that you have. In the body of the answer, talk about this analogy, crocodile. What could be the nature of this crocodile? It could be using terror as a state policy. It could be using projects for undermining countries' sovereignty. For example, China. What is the project that I'm talking about? Belt and Road Initiative. It could be a dictatorial regime, right? Despite of all these negative features, immoral features or unethical features, you still have to interact with them, because your country's national interest in one way or the other will be reduced if you don't interact with them, right? That should be the next part of the body of the answer. I've given you examples, right? If you don't interact with Myanmar, what will happen? The same was the case with Sri Lanka. So you can take examples from all these things and you can put that in your answers, right? And remember, here you don't have to just talk from the neighboring regions, okay? But since they have spoken about if you live on the river, I applied it to the case of India. You can apply it to the case of ongoing Russia-Ukraine war as well, right? Was NATO required by Ukraine? Because when you look at Ukraine and Russia, they share a very long border, long history, and all those kind of things. And NATO was something that Russia has criticized and condemned from a very long period of time. So if they wanted to live near the river, they should have befriended, they should have taken the Russia's concern into the picture, right? Russia on its part should have understood the concerns of Ukraine as well. So it goes on like this. Just showcase some diverse examples, and that should be more than enough over here. But, okay, you can't be pragmatic in all instances, in all scenarios, because when you're pragmatic, there is that probability that someone else might be unhappy. When we are not talking about the exploitation faced by Rohingyas in Myanmar, these Rohingyas, right, we're not speaking up. Even though we are being a democratic country, even though there is a directive principle of state policy which talks about maintaining international peace and order, right? So pragmatism in all instances and contexts is not a feature that we need to follow in foreign policy. We need to stand for certain moral rules and ethics that you can talk about. That could be your conclusion. All right. So this is about the 6th A question. Let us now move on and discuss the last question of section A. Discuss the impact of civil service values such as integrity. Integrity. What is integrity? It is strict adherence to ethics. Then you have low corruption and impartiality on the socio-economic development of the country. So one of the reasons, I'll talk about the economic aspect of it. One of the reasons why there is huge amount of tax evasion is people believe that people who are rich, they're not paying taxes. Political leaders are not paying taxes. Yatha Raja Tata Praja. You have heard of this Sanskrit phrase as well. Now, when you have political leaders who are showcasing high levels of integrity, right, when they're paying their taxes on time, it kind of creates that example that others can follow. Is it not? Economic development, low corruption. Whenever there is corruption in any program, okay, be it in public or private, at the end of the day, the people who are affected by it happens to be the poorer sections in the society. When you eliminate this corruption, right, there will be greater amount of welfare for poorer sections in the society, and this helps in the inclusive development, economic development. You can talk about points like that for integrity, low corruption, and impartiality. When you have integrity, when you're showcasing integrity, you're also building trust amongst the public servants. Is it not? Trust. So what happens when you're building trust amongst the Common people, not public servants, amongst common people. What happens then? There will be greater acceptance of government rules and regulations, right? The survivability of our constitution of democracy as such will also be ensured. That is very important, right? When you look at these countries which have worked very well in terms of human development indicators, like Nordic countries, Norway, Sweden, Finland, one of the reasons why they have achieved that high rank happens to be they have showcased high integrity in their governance system, low corruption, right? And also impartiality. How is this impartiality related to achieving socio-economic development? Now, when we talk about all these scams that happen, in one way or the other, the person who has done the scam has benefited not just him but also his relatives. When you talk about the political scenario of our country, it is father-son nepotism that usually follows. Nepotism, basically, right? You are being partial to certain people, to certain communities. When you're voting, also you're being partial towards your religion or towards your caste. All these things are not going to work out, right? It's been, 70 odd years of independence, and if we still are partial on those terms, whatever dreams that our forefathers had in terms of equality, liberty, justice, and fraternity, they will not be realized. Is it not? And this will have a cumulative effect in terms of reducing the happiness in the society. And when you look at gross national happiness, India is a lot more unhappy than Pakistan. Is it not? When you're showcasing that partiality, many of the people, even though they're talented and have the opportunities, they will not be able to realize it. And where do you see this partiality? You see this in sports organization. There are many instances where sportsperson accuse those concerned of being partial to some and not being impartial in other scenarios, right? So all these points are there. If you want to realize a sustainable, happy, inclusive economy, you need to have integrity, low corruption, and impartiality, because it will lead to socio-economic development. When you don't have that partiality, you're looking at the other person as your brother belonging to the same mother, that is India. There will be tolerance, there will be less of communalism, there will be less of regionalism. Is it not? So all these points, you can use it to justify these things. So that's about the section A questions of this question paper. Let us now move on and discuss the section B questions. The next set of questions which we will be discussing are section B case study based questions. All right. Right. Let me just look at the first case study. Here, remember, we won't be going in detail of each and every topic, but rather our purpose is to give you a framework that might be useful for you in attempting case study questions for the upcoming mains examination. Let me read out the case study. You're a senior manager in the overseas operation of ABC Corporation. You are a senior manager. ABC is a multinational corporation in the field of IT services and is seeking to expand its business avenue. 2 years ago, it started a new venture in tourism and hospitality and has invested 20 million in the neighboring country X. Investment of 20 million in the neighboring country. All right, good. Country X is a small island nation with a small but developing economy. 6 months after the construction of the hotel began, the project was delayed due to corona pandemic. Okay, here you have the challenge of pandemic and the effect it has created. One of the challenges. Construction had come to a halt and government had promised tax cuts. To make up for any loss that your company might have witnessed because of this pandemic, the government has given you tax cuts. Okay? Promised tax cuts and other incentives for the corporation to continue its operation. After the pandemic, the country didn't recover as expected and financial mismanagement by government led to further economic collapse. Here I'll rephrase it by, I wouldn't say corruption, but rather mismanagement. And when you look at the pandemic and how we dealt with it, most of the governments in the world mismanaged it, at least in the initial part of pandemic response. Okay, right, moving on. The economy is in free fall where the price of imports has skyrocketed. Rising fuel prices and other construction imports have made construction extremely costly. Okay. Now, from a business perspective, doing business over there is very costly for you. Right. The government is hopeful of the economic recovery and wants the corporation to invest further. It wants more investment because it is expecting the economy to bounce back, and wants the corporation to invest further and not abandon them at this critical moment. Even though the construction business is getting costly for you, please stay with us so that in the future make more investment, because we believe that in the future there will be a lot much growth that the island nation will witness. All right. As a senior manager, you have in earlier instances negotiated with the government for better deals and incentives. Considering the huge risk involved in investing more, the board now wants you to negotiate a complex tax-free status. The board is asking for a tax-free status, all right, for the project. Initially, they were providing tax cuts. Now the board wants tax-free status for the project and expeditious economic clearances for the previously unapproved projects. Even those projects which were not approved earlier for whatever reasons it might be. It might be because the corporation did not give all the information which was required. Whatever the information, whatever the reasons might be, the board wants you to negotiate in such a way that even the unapproved projects of the past are given faster clearances now. Right. They've also mentioned that some of these projects were in eco-sensitive zones. That is why the clearances were not given. These new projects would increase the investment to 100 million. The government of X is upset by such proposal as this would not create any value because they're asking for tax incentive. Right? Complete tax, not incentive but as such tax-free. In return, other than a few extra jobs. But the government is desperate for dollar reserves and doesn't want to miss the opportunity. As someone who has studied the tourism potential of the country, you know that it is good to invest more. So it is your personal opinion and professional opinion that investing more, even though it is getting costly, is in the future, is in the best interest of the future of the company. As someone who has studied, right? Though the new incentives sought by the board create profits for the shareholders, you feel that it is morally wrong for an already struggling country. Instead, you propose to launch a humanitarian drive for struggling locals where the hotel is being constructed, as this would increase the brand value and awareness. The proposal that you have come out with is a humanitarian proposal of investing in the local area, creating awareness, creating brand value for your company, right? But your suggestion is shut off and the board wants you to somehow negotiate the deal with the government of X and nothing more. The deal that they want, that is tax-free status, giving faster clearances for those projects which have not been cleared. Your suggestion is shut off and the board wants you to somehow negotiate the deal. Right. Discuss the ethical issues involved in this situation. What are the options available to you? Discuss their merits and demerits. The next one is, what is corporate ethics? Examine the role of private corporation in society. Should they work towards creating value for people and the ecosystem where they serve? Let me first come to the ethical issues over here. The first and foremost ethical issue is managing your personal opinion versus the professional needs. In your heart, you know that it is immoral what the board is asking, but as a professional of that particular company, you're obligated to perform the duty. If you feel that you can't do that, you have to resign. That is one ethical issue. The other ethical issue is the rights of the country X. Okay. Now, some of the projects which are to be implemented in the eco-sensitive zone, if we are implementing it by giving faster clearances, there is all the probability that at the end of the day, they might not be in the best interest of that country. There might be forest exploitation, degradation, which might cause problem for the locals living in the region. It might also hamper the tourism of the country in the longer run. All right. What is the other ethical issue that you're facing? Right? Ensuring justice. Now, country X is someone who has faced the pandemic, who has not been able to recuperate from the pandemic in a way that they had expected. Now, whatever 100 million that you are giving, right? That 100 million should be used in a fair manner so that it creates value, not just for the company, but for the country as well. And here, the deal that your company is asking you is not a fair one. It's completely biased towards the company, right? So here the justice value is being flouted. The other thing, when the company is asking you to negotiate a deal with a country X, right, for giving faster clearances for those unapproved projects, transparency is also being flouted. The other ethical issue over here is profit versus people. The company wants you to focus on the profit for the shareholders because it is for these people that you have a moral responsibility first and foremost, the shareholders. But you want to keep in mind the shareholders and also the people. These are just some of the ethical issues involved in this case. What are the options available to you? I'll give you a framework to generate options. Whenever you're generating options, some of the standard ones are: you do not take up what your board is saying. Alright? You take up exactly what your board is saying. Basically, these are extreme in nature. Right? One, not doing any work. The other one is doing exactly what your company is asking you. The other thing is, you will take up what board wants. You will take up the interest of the government of country X and find a solution which will be win-win for both of them. Alright? Or you will say that you will try to convince the board not to go ahead, right, by persuading them in a proper manner to not take up those tax-free status and faster clearances that they are trying to see. Right? You can generate a few more options based on, see here when I'm saying do not take up, you're focusing on your professional growth. You're focusing on your personal pleasure. This is hedonistic way of dealing with a problem. So how much of philosophies that you have? You have hedonism, right? You have Kantism, right? Then, sorry, this arrow represents this one, not this one. Kantism is this, right? This option. You're not taking up this work because you believe the means that they're trying to take up to achieve an end is not in the right interest, right? You can also talk about informing the shareholders of the decision of the board that is not in their good interest, right? You can generate minimum of, if you can generate 5 diverse course of actions available, it is highly accepted. So you have hedonism, you have Kant, you have utilitarianism, right? You can talk about other philosophies as well. For example, Buddha spoke about middle marga, right? You can talk about John Rawls' social justice theory. What is the course of option which upholds social justice? You can try to, right, say that we need to have a course of option or a course of action where I am asking for tax-free for this project, and for that project which are being implemented in eco-sensitive zones, you are wanting, all right, in that particular instance to focus on the social justice of the local people living in the tribal area, and you can persuade them, right? This comes in win-win situation. So the course of action that you choose should uphold Kantism. Means and ends, they have to be balanced. All right? Your course of action should showcase that middle marga, right? It should not be extremes. And whatever course of action that you choose, it should uphold the greatest value, uphold the greatest amount of equality, liberty, fraternity, and social justice, right? So when you take up these merits, when you are saying that you are not taking, that you are taking exactly the same action that your company is asking you, what is the merit? The merit is your professional competence, your professional career growth will continue. This will give you pleasure. What is the demerit? The demerit is the interest of the country X will be violated. You might have crisis of conscience and so on and so forth. For each and every option, you have to do this, merits and demerits. But if I have to generate one course of action and say that this is the final course of action, try to persuade both the board and the government and ask for win-win situation. And in that win-win situation, asking for tax-free in the correct ongoing project is fine. But going for faster clearances in eco-sensitive zone might not be feasible. So what you can do, you can chart out a plan for other areas in the country where tourism potential is high, and you can pitch this idea to the board. And you can ask them, investment in this area will be good for the country in the future. And going for tax-free, right, is the best possible way forward when it comes to other projects, right? And also you need to help the board or persuade the board in building brand awareness. What you can do, you can hire a marketing firm, take their opinion, right? Give them all the data that they require, take their opinion, take the opinion of the marketing firm, and you showcase with proper objectivity that building brand awareness in a time like this will be better for the company, not just in this country, but also elsewhere in the world, right? So you need to choose a course of action which upholds this win-win situation, which creates least amount of harm. So here you can use Kantian philosophy to justify this, because you are not trying to deviate from any important ethical principles, right? Here you are also focusing on Buddha's middle marga, right? The other thing is social justice. Those faster clearances in eco-sensitive zone, you're trying to persuade the board to reduce that, or to let go of that, or to make the changes in those projects where the impact of constructing a hotel in eco-sensitive zone is as less as possible. And you can give examples as how some of the companies who have not taken the public opinion or have not built a brand for themselves in the public have lost out, even in the short term and in the long term. If we talk about this, the company of Adani was criticized and the locals protested against Adani company in the country of Australia as well, right? So all these things are there. Generate 5 minimum course of actions. All right, there's 5 minimum course of actions you can generate from the perspective of so many philosophies that you have: hedonism, utilitarianism, Kantism, right, social justice theory, right, like this, Buddha's middle marga, and then you can move on. This is the framework that I wanted to talk about. What are the course of actions available? Discuss their merits and demerits. It should be done in this way. The next thing, all right, what is the next question that they have asked? What is corporate ethics? Corporate ethics is nothing but utilizing or creating an ethical framework which places emphasis on not just on the profit of the company, but also places emphasis on the welfare of the people, no matter whether these people are customers or not. Okay, that is what corporate ethics can mean. This is a definition that I have given from my side. There are technical definitions of corporate ethics as well. Corporate ethics is nothing but an ethical framework for the management, implementation, monitoring of the corporate working, right? Now, examine the role of private corporation in society. Now, post 1991, we have reached a situation where the private companies are investing a lot more than the government, right? These private companies are in crucial sectors such as health, education, tourism, and so on and so forth. Here they are providing not just some service, here they are creating social impact, right? And if they make their health and education not accessible or affordable to the major sections in the society, then private corporations are giving rise to inequality. Do you guys agree with me? Right? So that is one more thing that you can talk about. Examine the role of private corporation in society. The role would be to create social impact. That is one thing. Minimize inequalities and tackling poverty, okay, providing platforms for innovations, right? You can go on and give 2 more points like this. Apart from that, should they work towards creating value for people and the ecosystem where they serve? Absolutely, they should. Varna, whatever role that we have given, right, the social impact, minimizing inequalities and poverty, all of them will not be realized. Now, when we talk about post 1991, there has been a greater investment by private corporations, the kind of CSR activities that they are involving in, for example, the Tata companies, the Infosys, the Wipro, they're investing in women education. At the end of the day, this is what is required for our country. No? The historical discrimination that the women have faced will be reduced, right? So this is something that you can talk about. If private corporations start investing in some of the persistent challenges that we are facing in the present times, right? And coming out with innovative solutions, for example, climate change, and making it accessible and affordable to anyone who wants it. This would be good in terms of making sure that the human race will survive for a few more hundreds of years. Okay? When we talk about vaccines, if the companies, if the corporations take out their waiver IPR regulations, it would be much more easier to provide vaccine equity. India had approached WTO for this particular purpose. WTO did agree, but only in a superficial manner. Right? Examine the role of private corporations. You keep in mind those 17 sustainable goals. In achieving all those 17 sustainable goals, you have a role of private corporations over there. Right? Here, I'm re-emphasizing again, our emphasis is on creating a framework to tell you how to think easily and quickly when you are in the examination hall. So we are focusing on that framework, right? Not going into the absolute detail of the topic, right? So this is about the 7th case study. Let us now move on and discuss the 8th case study. The 8th case study is X is a 27-year-old medical representative who is part of healthcare major ABC Life Division. Last month, he allegedly committed suicide by jumping in front of a train. A note found on him is said to have mentioned sales pressure or the inability to meet sales target as having compelled him to take the step. The incident sparked unrest among ABC's local field representatives who have staged a series of demonstrations demanding adequate compensation for the dead employee's family and better service conditions for field representatives. An investigation was ordered and it was found that ABC Pharma lured doctors to recommend their brand of medicines through high-value bribes through medical representatives such as smartphones, credit cards, e-vouchers, etc. Doctors are also lured to prescribe unrelated yet expensive tests in ABC labs. And at the receiving end of this are medical representatives who are tracked by the supervisor using iPads, which is a source of constant stress. X was not able to meet this target and his incentives were cut. He had many loans to pay off. With huge stress and mounting pressure, X committed suicide. There is no law to regulate unethical promotional practices prevalent in the pharmaceutical industry. Patients are forced to buy costly medicines and go to costly tests. Highlighting the instances from the above case study, examine the importance of ethics in healthcare. Not so long ago, we spoke about it, is it not? Highlighting the instances from the above case study, examine. Now, when we talk about healthcare in the present scenario, post 1991, there has been a rise in private healthcare enterprises. They are majorly now responsible up to 70 to 80% of providing healthcare services in our country. And whatever issues the healthcare faces, it has been highlighted here. Apart from that, you have come across during the pandemic times, right? People were not able to get beds in these private hospitals. People were charging left, right, and center. Very high cost during the pandemic, right? All of these things you have come across. You also know that if you go for a common cold to these private hospitals, they make you go through a battery or large number of tests so that their business improves. So many of the things you have faced in your life itself. So I won't get into that. Highlighting the instances from the above case study, examine the importance of ethics in healthcare. The first importance lies in, right, if you have ethics in healthcare, okay, there would be greater amount of probability of leading a dignified life. Not just for the patients, but also for other people here, right? For example, the person X if they had not put so much of sales target pressures on him, right? He would not have met that constant stress. He would be leading a dignified life. If the doctors work in an ethical manner, if the hospitals work in an ethical manner, when someone has some cold or some basic common diseases, when they go there, they just give them what basic minimum tablets or measures are required to treat them, rather than giving them or ordering a lot many tests. In such cases, the patients are also leading a dignified life, right? And when they are doing that, the people's trust on the healthcare system increases, on private healthcare system increases, right? The reason why I'm mentioning this is, today itself I was reading about an article where a bunch of people in the region of Puducherry attacked the doctors because they felt the doctors had not conducted the proper procedure in taking care of a boy who was admitted there, right? You have come across many instances like this. Apart from that, ethics in healthcare sector will help to build equity. You've come across instances where the private healthcare centers have denied providing emergency healthcare service to those people who don't have the money. The government, the Supreme Court, have time and again told that this is not something that you should do. So in private healthcare centers, they forego their primary aim on just profit and focus on profit plus people. They will be able to bring in a lot much of equitable growth. They will be building the brand value for themselves. People will be trusting of it. There is this one hospital in Karnataka called as Narayana Nethralaya, right? This is one such hospital who is famous for that, right? They conduct free surgeries for those patients who cannot afford it, not just from within India, from elsewhere in the world as well. And you have come across many such examples, right? These are just some of the importance that ethics has in the healthcare sector. Okay, improving affordability, that is something, yeah, you can write as separate. Because in healthcare sector, it's not just about the hospitals, right? It is also about those pharmaceutical companies. They are also working with a profit motive, and when they price their products at a very high, costly rate, not many people will be able to access it, afford it as well. But if these pharmaceutical companies go for those products, marketing their products at a reasonable rate, affordability and accessibility improves. That is one more importance of ethics in healthcare sector. You have come across some issues regarding clinical trials. What are these issues in clinical trials in the healthcare sector? Sometimes they get people who are vulnerable. They give them the lure of money. And in the clinical trial, there is always a probability that the person who is going through that clinical trial might suffer some losses. In the worst possible scenario, he or she might die, right? So addressing this is also quite important. If you have that ethics and healthcare sectors, clinical trials, the issues that we are facing as of now will also be avoided. Okay, people who participate in civil clinical trials should be given appropriate amount of awareness about the threats that they might face. The pharmaceutical companies should ensure that they are providing them proper rehabilitation and the monetary compensation, not just in the near term but also in the long term, if any other side effects comes into the picture, if that particular person is facing any long term issues as well, right? So examine the role of ethics in healthcare sector. Keep in mind, see, time and again I've spoken about some important concepts such as which are enshrined in the constitution, such as equality, liberty, right, justice. Use those kind of things in your answers as well, okay, wherever possible. Here I've used the dignified life. This is from article 21, right? Here I've used trust. I've been using these terms. So whenever you're writing an ethics answer, you have to showcase these ethical terms. That is very important. The next thing is, what would your options be if you were X? How would you handle the situation? Again, you would leave the job, That is one thing that you can do, or else you will talk to the seniors and tell them that these are the stress that you're facing and complain against those people who are pressurizing you. Fine. Or you will blow the whistle and talk to the concerned authorities in the public domain that these are the things that they are trying to do. Right? You can create a video, you can post it anonymously. All these things are there. You can talk to a counselor and deal with the stress that you are facing. So you have multiple options available to you to deal with the stress that you're facing rather than committing suicide. If you're facing this economic crisis in your life, you can talk to your friends, you can talk to the bank and ask for restructuring of the loans. From friends, you can ask for some more money, right? These are the options that are there that you can pursue rather than going and taking the extreme step of committing suicide. Fine? So that's the thing. Here, the person, see, whenever emotions get the better of you, when you find it very extreme, people usually commit suicide, right? But we should not blame them, right? I have come across people who usually treat people who have survived suicide attempts in a rather negative way. That should not be the case. We should not stigmatize. Mental health issues are something that everyone is facing in the present scenario to a very large degree. Fine? You can include a step where you have emotional health counselors in those pharmaceutical companies as well. You can, here they have pointed out that they don't have any prevalent law to prevent false advertising. The government can come out with such a law. What are the options available for X? Apart from committing suicide, there are quite many things, right? Let's talk, you can highlight about it since I've already spoken. Remember, if they give you a question with vis-a-vis suicide, don't take a very judgmental stance against those people who have committed suicide, right? You have to deal with them in a compassionate, humane manner. That is what is very important. And here, when we look at the pharmaceutical company ABC, they did not deal with their people in a compassionate, humane manner. They did not deal with the possible patients in a humane manner. The doctors themselves did not deal with it, right? So this is what you can talk about, and just highlighting some of the importance of ethics in healthcare sector. You might have witnessed, if you have gone to public healthcare facilities, that is government hospitals, the doctors would come at 9 a.m., punch the identity process that is there, and then go back and work in private hospitals or the private clinics, right? That is also one more ethical issue that is happening. The government is paying them money, they are earning money from private hospitals, from the private practice. But when people go to the government hospitals, the doctors are not there. You come across people who are nurses administering certain things, people who are not even acquainted with medical process. The cleaners sometimes are administering these medical drugs and syringes, right? All these things are bad, right? So you can highlight those things as well. When you focus on that ethical behavior, all these issues will be minimized. Corruption, this is nothing but a form of corruption that these doctors are engaging in, and this will be reduced, right? That's about this case study. Let us now move on and discuss the next case study. You are hailing from a remote village. You are the only person who is pursuing a degree in your community. You have had access to education and modern values. You want every child in your village to have a good education. During holidays, you visit your village and teach the children. In one such instance, you have come to know that one of the girls whom you used to teach is getting married. She is 17 and is about to complete her 12th standard. Child marriages like this were common within your community in the past, but these have largely reduced now. You want to eliminate such practices. You have come to know that the person she is getting married to is your cousin. You talk to him about the importance of her education and the ills of child marriage. He seems to ignore your advice but promises that she will be allowed to continue her education and is even ready to fund it. The girl's parents have convinced her to accept the marriage as they can't afford to educate her any further. You speak to both the parties again, but they're not ready to call off the marriage or wait for another year until she turns 18. Your mother scolds you for interfering in their family matters and says that nothing much is going to happen in a year. She warns that any further attempts would also lead to fight within the family and even within the community. If that happens, you will not be allowed to interact within the community and teach them further. What are the options available to you in this scenario? Discuss their merits and demerits. Would you consider contacting the police despite such a warning from your mother? The second thing is, why do you think people still practice child marriage? Highlighting the ethical issues associated with it. Right? Highlight the ethical issues associated with it. The third is, discuss the steps required to strengthen the community values in such scenarios. Now, in this case study, you are residing in a remote village and you have the noble objective of providing education to those who are in need. And you're trying to provide education to girls, and in one such case, you meet a 17-year-old girl who is being asked to get married even though she can read, right? She has talent and can set a very good and independent life for herself. The families are forcing her. The fiance is saying that even though he is going to marry her, right, he will provide or he will give education for her once she gets married and ensure that her dreams and aspirations are not thwarted because of marriage. Your mother tells, stop poking your nose in this business, because the two families might not like that. Okay, there might be conflicts since your family is staying in that village. Those the other families in the remote village might create challenges for them. The safety of your own family might be affected, right? And on the other side, you have an issue because here they are flouting the legal rules, right? We have an act called as Prevention of Child Marriage Act. You have special marriage act as well, which says that the legal age for a girl to get married is 18 years. Yes, there are certain exceptions to this under the personal religious laws. Nevertheless, going by the legal route also, what here it is happening is wrong. And if you go ahead and inform on the family on this marriage with the police, the community as such might not allow you to teach other students. And when that happens, so many of your students, their education will be thwarted. Okay, you won't be able to work in your remote village. So what is it that you have to do? That is what they have asked you. What are the options available to you in this scenario? I'm not going to talk about it, right? Because we have been doing that. I've given you a general framework with respect to that. You can accept your mother's decision and stay out of it. You can forget everyone and you can just inform on this marriage. Okay, you can try to persuade the family even more by talking to them, by giving them examples, by letting them meet certain civil society members. You can approach the community and request them not to do this, right? Or you can convince the girl to stand up for her own rights. Okay, you can try to convince the guy once again to not marry her at 17 but marry her after she turns of legal age, right? All these things are available to you. Each and every option, merits and demerits, you can talk about it. What is the course of action that you will choose? You will choose that course of action which will provide justice to each and everyone, those that are involved. You will be addressing the ethical issues through your course of action that you will be choosing, right? Basically, the option that you choose should create maximum goodness for everyone. All right, it has to minimize harm as much as possible. Go for that course of action. Here, I won't talk about all these options and merits and demerits. It becomes rather monotonous since we have been doing that in the last two case studies. I've just given you a framework. What is the framework that you need to remember? Remember the philosophies, right? Hedonism, utilitarianism, Kant, Gandhian, Buddha, okay, John Rawls, social justice theory, so on and so forth. You can contact an NGO and introduce them to what is happening. The NGO in turn, right, can report the case. Here you will not be in the blame. Your family safety will be assured. You can take that step also. That is up to, that is one more possible course of action, right? For me, what is important is the second thing. Why do you think people still practice child marriage? Highlight the ethical issues associated with it. My friends, before I talk about this, when you are talking about a case study, right, how to give an intro to a case study, usually the general acceptable behavior is you have to talk about the various stakeholders and the issues related to each of the stakeholders. Some people go for writing it, some people go for diagrammatic, I believe diagrammatic saves you a lot much of time. But doing this, even if it is diagrammatic on a 6-question basis, it can be a laborious process. In some case studies, you can go for highlighting the primary conflict in the case study. Here you have crisis of conscience. You don't know what is it that you have to do. Your conscience is clueless in this regard, right? And here also you have a conflict which is happening between your own morality and societal ethics as well. And this is something that we witness on a daily basis in our life as well, right? We might come across in our homes only maids, right? Usually they provide very good amount of education, right? But there are certain instances where you might have come across that the daughters of the maids or the sons of the maids might be married even before they turn the legal age. No amount of persuasion that you might have done would have worked. Many of the people, once when they will visit their village, they would have come across certain caste related practices that you know are not good, but still have practiced. There's so many instances like that. So what you can do in the introduction part, you can talk about how one's own personal morality is at odds with the societal ethics and how it can create crisis of conscience in you. This case study is based on that. 2 or 3 lines may it is done, right? So coming to the second question, why do you think people still practice child marriage in India? Highlight the ethical issues associated with it. Right now, when I talk about child marriage practices in India, nearly 1.8 million girls get married every year before they turn 18. This is UNICEF ka report data. Why does this happen? Multiple reasons. Still, we have prevalence of patriarchy, which considers men to be superior than women. All right, and based on this patriarchal notions, a man is responsible for the females in the household. The moment a female attains that puberty, she has to be married off, since she is viewed as a burden in this traditional patriarchal mindset, right? That is what is happening over here, right? When this happens, what is violated? The gender justice, the woman rights, all go for a toss. Don't use this term, but right, gender justice, woman rights, either of these two terms are violated, right? What might be the other reason? It might be out of compulsion, right? This compulsion could be because of lack of economic security, lack of social security. What does this mean? It means when a family don't have the resources, all right, to provide for their family members, to provide for their girls, what they do, they get them married off so that others can take care of her. And in our country, this is also one of the prominent reasons for that. The other thing is stigmatization that happens in our society. Stigmatization, prejudice, behavior, stereotype. You can talk about many things. What is the stigmatization? If a girl gets married late, the society views her as if she is a pariah. Something must be wrong in her. There must be something wrong in the family. People question her character. Not only the girl is stigmatized, but also the whole of family is stigmatized, right? That is something that also pushes people to get their kids married off as soon as possible, right? So you can talk about this aspect as well. Here I've just given you 3, right? There are still quite many reasons why still child marriages are practiced in India. Apart from the patriarchal notion, apart from the economic, apart from stigmatization, there are few more examples. For one, you can talk about how the government has failed to create awareness, because even though we have Prevention of Child Marriage Act, even though there are rules and regulations and penal measures for that, they are hardly implemented. Justice should be delivered in a timely manner so that the rules and provisions, they create some sort of fear amongst the common people in violating that. But there is no such type of timely and effective justice in our country. That could also be one of the reasons for increased child marriages in India, right? Now, when the pandemic happened, right? Many people lost their economic livelihood and the cases of child marriage increased. Many of the girls who were attending educational institutions, they could not attend because of these lockdowns, and they were not having the resources to sustain. So this also added to the woe, okay, added to the problems that they were already facing, right? So all these aspects you can talk about in the second part of your answer. Discuss the steps required to strengthen the community values in such scenarios. Here, I'm just going to give you a framework, right, based on some important programs such as Swachh Bharat, right, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, right, Beti Padhao. So what happened over here? Both of these programs are relatively successful compared to the earlier programs that we had. And the reason why they were successful was because of community participation, right? From the President of India till the common man, all of them participated. And we created awareness. We included NGOs. We included media, right? So when we work at this level and ensuring that as many stakeholders are included, we provided awards, right? We use technology. You might remember Take a Selfie with Your Daughter initiative of our Prime Minister. So when you're writing, discuss the steps required to strengthen the community values in such scenarios. Focus on the framework that we already have, where we have seen success, and just borrow that framework in this answer. Not just in this answer. Wherever they have asked about what are the changes that we need to bring at community level, if you keep these two things in your mind as inspiration, you can generate very good points. All right. Bringing a social change, right, is not possible just by bringing legal changes. It would require you to bring social change in the mindset of the people. Please remember that. And that is what we did in terms of Swachh Bharat and Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao programs, right? Let us now move on and discuss the next case study. Aruna is a young 32-year-old politician who has plans of contesting the next MLA elections. He is an engineer. Arun is an young 32-year-old politician who has plans of contesting the next MLA elections. He is an engineering graduate and worked as an electrical engineer in a reputed firm. While undertaking electrical works for public projects under the firm, he noticed the high levels of corruption while dealing with the public money and resolved to fight against corruption by being a legislator. In the past 5 years, he has actively worked towards organizing people and demanding various social works in his hometown through a number of campaigns. These campaigns are successful and is popular among the public. A state party that is in opposition has assured him a ticket for contesting the next election. The incumbent 3 times MLA is worried about Arun's rising popularity. He has started distributing saris, liquor and cash to the public. Arun campaigns on his popularity and further promises people of developmental work once he is elected. Arun is short of the huge marketing budget required to campaign across the constituency and reach every voter. With less time left, he isn't able to generate enough money through voluntary donations. Arun ultimately loses the elections by a narrow margin. Arun concludes that huge money is required to contest elections and notices that people seem to favor freebies. The next election is due in 5 years, and Arun has changed his strategy and has focused on using his popularity and political connection to make money by providing contracts, transfers, etc. His main aim now is to win in the upcoming elections. Would you agree with Arun's new plan of action? Do you think Arun has lost his initial ideals? Give reasons for your argument. Remember, when you are attempting this question, in the first instance itself, don't say that it is right or wrong. Reserve your opinion till you get to the end of your answer. In the initial stages, you apply various philosophies. Yes, if you go by Arun's plans that he has chosen for himself, he will be able to ensure the greatest happiness of the greatest number once he gets elected. If he is not elected, he won't have the necessary resources. So from a utilitarian perspective, at a later point in time, yes, this course of action might be useful. And it's not like that he is taking money from those people who can't afford it. It's people who already have money and they are providing him. So that is the stand that you have to take. Always remember that. The second question is, examine the influence of one's experiences in forming one's behavior and attitude. This experience might be generated at the level of family, and this might reflect in the behavior and attitude of the people. The experience might be generated in the society. Experience might be generated in the professional enterprises, and all these experiences cumulatively have an impact on the behavior and attitude of people. When I talk about Nelson Mandela's life, the experience of spending 27 years of his precious life in jail had an impact on his attitude and behavior in life. When I talk about Mahatma Gandhiji, when Mahatma Gandhiji went to South Africa, it was not for fighting against the Britishers there. He went for his own commercial purposes, but the way he was treated, the racist way he was treated, prompted him to take up the cause of the Indians in South Africa. Right? All these experiences, they can make or break us. Is it not? Some of the people, they tend to take up to Maoism, Naxalism, because they might have had an experience in their life where the government was not able to provide them justice. Some people take to terrorism based on this as well. Right? So when the experiences creates some sort of positiveness, when I talk about Buddha, right? The sight of seeing a dead person, a person who was having disease, right? A monk, all this cumulatively convinced him that there was something more to life and that he had to explore that. And that is what was reflected in his behavior and attitude once he got himself enlightened, once he became Buddha as well. So we can talk about all these points, right? So behavior from a family level, behavior at a educational level, how the experiences in family, education, workplace, society changes the behavior and attitude of the people from both positive perspective as well as negative perspective. You can generate quite good amount of points in that, right? Moving on, the next case study is you are a software developer in a social media company. You joined the company after graduation at its nascent stage. Over the past 2 years, the company has grown exponentially and has millions of users. You have worked hard for the growth of the company and have simultaneously cleared managerial certifications. The company today is valued at $2 billion. In recognition to your successful work, you have been promoted as a manager, and as a bonus, you have been offered a huge pay rise or company stock option with limited rise. The company has huge potential to grow, and you have chosen the stock options. You have also invested a portion of your savings in these stocks. After working as a manager for a few months, you have come to know that a chaotic and reckless environment exists at the top management, basically meaning workplace toxicity. The company allows too many of its managers to access the platform's central controls and more sensitive information without adequate oversight. Some of the company's senior-most executives have been trying to cover up the company's serious vulnerabilities, and one or more current employees may be working for foreign intelligence service. The intelligence service gathers sensitive information on foreign political activists. You realize that this poses a threat to users' personal information, company shareholders, national security, and to democracy. The company's leadership has misled its own board and government regulator about its security vulnerabilities, leading to a huge market valuation. You feel that it's morally wrong and the company's practices are unethical. You discuss these issues with a senior manager, but he rationalizes the company's practices are. He rationalizes the issue, pointing out that every tech company oversells itself in the market and that the data is the new oil that has to be explored and exploited. You think about releasing these sensitive documents anonymously, but that could lead to many investigations and the collapse of the company's stocks, on which many people, common people like you and me, might have invested. That would erase your personal fortunes, good, and years of effort invested in the company. So discuss the ethical dilemma as a whistleblower would undergo. Do you think it's important to be morally correct at every step of your life? Here they've not asked about the case study as such, but they've asked about whistleblower. Now over here, when you talk about the introduction for this case study, you can talk about how we discussed a question, right? Corporate ethics. Here there is absolutely no corporate ethics whatsoever. And they're not creating any positive social impact, but rather they're creating negative social impact, which will be disastrous in the longer run. So as a software developer who has risen to the stage of manager and who is acquainted with the top level management, what are the steps that you will take? Do you have the courage to open up about these mishappenings to the world? As a whistleblower, the first and the foremost thing that you face is, at an individual level, how will you be affected? Here, the person will be affected because he himself has invested. And the moment he goes out and makes those accusations, right, his investment will become very less. There will be no value to it. So you might suggest to me, sir, remove the investment that he has made and invest someplace else. But that would be something wrong. You can't do that, right? That is also immoral. Because you have access to sensitive information, you can't use that sensitive information for your own benefit. Please remember that. Apart from that, what the whistleblower usually faces, they face the issue of not having the cooperation of other people. Right here, the senior manager is saying, hey, don't do that. He's giving the excuse that each and every tech company oversells itself. He involves in such kind of things because they need investment and whatnot. Rationalization. What is rationalization? When you are trying to provide fake excuses or false excuses to justify your wrong actions, that is what is called as rationalization. The whistleblower will also at some point in time will try to rationalize when he is seeing that others who are acquainted with this condition are also rationalizing it. The whistleblower, all right, will also face the issue of the amount of benefit that they might get if they keep their mouth shut, and this is something that the software developer is also facing. Benefits could be in terms of investment, benefits could be in terms of career growth, benefits could be in terms of how you might be blacklisted in the market for blowing whistle. So when you are blacklisted in the market for blowing the whistle, the other companies will not be tempted to take you on, right? Then your financial security of yourself and your family will be in jeopardy. We can talk about that particular aspect as well. Your family, all right, might be subjected to all sorts of pressure tactics. Pressure tactics might also be expressed on you. Accusations might be made on you once you blow the whistle. There is that fear as well. You will lose your anonymity, right? There will be articles written like this person was like that. He was unhappy with the management of the company. That is why he blew the whistle like this. So many things might happen. Do you want to take that amount of laborious pressure on yourself? Most of the people who know about what is happening, they tend to keep their mouth shut because of this reason. They don't want to face the hassle of what comes after they blow the whistle, right? So many challenges. But in spite of the challenges, there are people who have the moral courage to come out and talk about these things. You have Julian Assange, you have Edward Snowden. You all know what happened once they came out with it. Julian Assange, he was slapped with a case in terms of sexual harassment. Okay, Edward Snowden was declared as enemy of the state, right? All these things are there. In spite of all these things, you need to go ahead and have the moral courage, because there is this one Kantian principle that you have to remember. Act in such a way that your action will become a universal law. If you keep your mouth shut, these illegal activities will go on and on and on and on. And it will never have any true value to the growth of the country, to the growth of the company. But once you blow the whistle, the amount of blowback that these companies will get by the common citizens will force them to change their behavior and attitude for the better, right? That is the way that you need to act in such a way that it will become a universal law. And when you keep this in mind, you need to have that moral courage, because talking about it will bring positive changes for the companies in future, for the employees, and for the common people and the country as such. Right? What is the next question? Discuss the importance of data security and ethical aspects of data mining. Data security is important from a perspective of an individual, because if others have access to your data, they can manipulate the way you think. They can manipulate your behaviors, and that is not right here. That is also their foreign intelligence, right? The other foreign intelligence of some other country is using the data for their own selfish purposes. The integrity, the unity of the country is at the task, right? Will be compromised if there is no data security. These data might be sold by the companies for their own benefits. For example, Facebook sold some of its data to Cambridge Analytica, and the Cambridge Analytica firm used this data to manipulate the elections in United States in the year 2016 between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, right? And ethical aspects of data mining. Ethical aspects, again, over here it is justice, it is privacy, right? It is attitude formation, quite many things like that. Moving on, the next question is, what are the options available to you? What would be the best option that you can conclude on? I've given you a framework. apply this framework. You can keep your mouth shut, all right, or else you can make sure that you go to another company, then you can blow the whistle, right? Or you can stay in the company and blow the whistle and take on whatever comes. You can try to approach another senior manager, talk to them about these things, okay? Or you can anonymously publish all these things. Quite many options are available to you. What is the best course of action that you have to choose? Something which will uphold the constitutional principles, an option which will make sure that means and ends are in consonance, okay? And these means and ends you have to adopt even if it creates some amount of harm for you in the shorter term. Remember what I told you in terms of can't act in such a way that your action will become a universal law, right? Along with that, the last case study is Nandgarh is a small remote district. It has deciduous vegetation that receives adequate rainfall and has an irrigation canal flowing through it. Agriculture is the main activity in the district which lacks industry. Shivpur is its administrative center that has a defunct paper industry. The industry has been closed due to mismanagement. It has all the facilities of a district headquarters. Earlier, the industry used to employ many workers and the town was buzzing with activities. A railway line passes 10 km from Shivpur. The state government offers a 5-year tax holiday as an incentive to industries. You have plans of reviving the paper industry and decide to take benefits of the tax break. You acquire the defunct industry and work hard on reviving the eucalyptus plantation and strengthening and modernizing the irrigation with drip irrigation with the help of agriculture department. It has benefited the local farmers to diversify their income sources. You have employed the local people and were happy to get jobs near their homes. The industry required huge investment to renew the whole machinery. Despite this, you have provided the employees with basic income. Let me just read out the last few lines again. You have employed the local people and were happy to get jobs near their homes. The industry required huge investment to renew the whole machinery. Despite this, you have provided the employees with basic income during the lockdown. Good. There is a major reviewing pending by the district administration to decide on the tax incentive. The incentive is dependent on a few conditions of meeting the required employment and value created. The official responsible for this review is delaying it. You have complained about the same with the administration but have not heard back from them. You are increasingly facing power issues and you have written and requested for power department for increasing the authorized usage, but they are delaying it. You speak with the owners of other industries and found that the administration is riddled with corruption and no work will progress without bribing the officials. You are upset that beneficial industries are made to suffer. You raise the issue at higher level in the state and even through media channels. This has upset the district administration. The officer has pointed out the lack of full pay to the employees during the lockdown and has threatened to review negatively. Your efforts to improve irrigation have received backlash from the agriculture department. Now, you are expected to pay more than before to smoothen the operations of your industries. Discuss the ethical values associated with corruption. How does it affect the growth of the country? Right, let's talk about the first thing, that is discuss the ethical values associated with corruption. What are the values which are associated with it? It is selfishness or greed, you can talk about it. It is transparency, right? It is accountability, fine, justice, and it goes on like this, right? Talk about minimum of 5 values which are associated with corruption, right? You can talk about integrity, which is violated, right? How does it affect the growth of the country? Corruption affects welfare programs which are intended to bring welfare to the poorer sections of the society. So on and so long we have this, we cannot realize the dream of tackling poverty in our country completely. That is one thing. Corruption incentivizes. When people see corruption happening and they see that people are corrupt, are progressing in their life materialistically, it creates a vicious cycle where others are also wanting to follow that. And at the end of the day, it is the middlemen or the common people who will have to pay the price. You have heard of this song where they say that in 3 Idiots film, Rishwat dena to papa ne kuch sikhaya. That line, it talks about how we have accepted the behavior of corruption as well, right? So when we have accepted this behavior, there is no right motivation to tackle it as well, right? And corruption is not just in terms of poor economics, it can also be in terms of mindset as well, right? Here power has corrupted the minds of the bureaucrats. It will lead to relativism. It will lead to important projects like this not being given the go ahead, and employment will be affected, anger will rise, resentment will rise amongst the people. I've told you this time and again, one of the reasons why Arab Spring happened was the high level of corruption that the people witnessed in these Middle Eastern countries. Right? Anyhow, moving on, the next question is explain the values of public administrations which are neglected in this case study. You think about all the constitutional values, equality, right, justice, right, apart from that responsiveness, commitment to service. As public servants, you have to work for the welfare of the public. All those values are violated over here, is it not? That is something that you can talk about. Apart from that, the last question is, how would you proceed further? Evaluate if relocate to other districts with favorable administration is a better option. How would you proceed further? It is nothing but asking for various course of action. Here they have not explicitly asked you to talk about the merits and demerits, but nevertheless just mention the options. You can relocate, or you can stay there and fight the administration. You can bribe the administration. You can further fight through media channels. You can still complain to the higher authorities in the state and fight it out. Would evaluate if relocating to other districts with favorable administration is a better option? Speaking personally, yes, it might be. Okay, but personally also, whatever investment you have made already in this will be a loss for you. But more important than that, the people of the region who are relatively backward, they will lose out on standard quality life if you move out. You have a moral responsibility, not just towards your own investment or any shareholders of the company, but you have a moral responsibility for the people in the region because you have created dreams and aspirations for them. Build awareness, build positive brand value vis-a-vis what steps you're taking, and the people themselves will force the district administration to make sure that the company stays there. And when I say force, it is not violent. It could be civil protest which might happen in a peaceful manner. And these are things that have happened quite many times in the history of our country, right? So these are some basic and important things. Again, I'm telling you, we have not focused, all right, on making sure that we give you each and every aspect of content detail, but rather we are focused on giving you the framework so that at the end of the day, this video remains as less as possible without compromising on the direction of the framework that you need to score more than 100 plus in your ethics paper. If you have any doubts, feel free to contact me on my Telegram ID, Umesh199101, with respect to what we have discussed, all right, or any doubts related to ethics. Thank you for your time. I wish you the very best for your upcoming examinations.